This is your husband, Jimmy, speaking. I just wanted you to know I'm fine, very fit. Give my love to my little boy, Carlton. Tell him to look after his mummy while his daddy's away. Well, that's just about all I can say, but keep your chin up. Let's hope the war's soon over.
How old is he?
My boy is 4 and a half.
Fine little chap now. He must be going to school soon.
Yes. Well, he's just started school now.
Yeah. And what is your profession? Civil life?
Well, I was an apprentice marine engineer.
I see. And then you were on the most dangerous job there is, submarine work. Were you injured when you had to come up?
No, I was quite all right.
That was the message from James Fulthorpe. And here, I think, is James Fulthorpe again, just to say goodbye and have the last word himself.
Well, goodbye, Phyllis. Don't worry now. Everything's grand. The people here are just like our people. And beautiful fresh air, something I've never seen for a long time. Goodbye, darling.
The prisoner sending that message was James Fulthorpe of Loo in Cornwall, as you might have been able to hear. He had been captured in 1943 when his submarine had been depth-charged by an Italian warship in the Straits of Messina in the Mediterranean. The 40-man crew had escaped, but the sailors were then machine-gunned by German aircraft. Although one man was killed, the rest of the crew was captured, and James spent the remainder of the war as a prisoner of war. His son, Carlton, who is mentioned in the recording, now lives in Haywards Heath, and he came into our Brighton studio recently, while the disc finder, Alan, joined us from Nottingham. I began by asking Alan exactly how he had come by the disc.
Well, for many years I worked at Radio Luxembourg, and on the 4th floor, our record library, mainly there were 78s, and they were shellac and weighed very, very heavy, and the floor used to sag. So we used to get rid of them by smashing them, skip them, do whatever to get rid of them. Yeah, well, what I used to do was go through these records to see if I could add anything to my own collection. And I came across these 5 German recordings, and I recognised the insignia on them, swastika, and I thought, oh, these look fascinating. So I had a listen to them, and among all these gems was this little interview with James Fulthorpe, and I thought, oh, he's talking about his 4.5-year-old son. It'd be wonderful if I could get that to him. And that started my quest, so to speak.
And were they all the same sort of thing, essentially propaganda broadcasts?
Yeah. Quite a lot of them were in German. Some of them were in English, presumably English collaborators working for the Germans who had very, sorry BBC, but very impeccable BBC rounded tones.
Well, those very strange, rather high-pitched voices.
Yeah, the most strangest thing about hearing these, though, is that they're talking about the enemy was repelled today, which, of course, we were the enemy.
Yes.
English people talking about the enemy.
Yes,
which very strange.
Did you spend much time trying to trace Carlton at this stage?
Would you believe 30 years? When I got these was probably in the early 60s, and although it gave an address on the record, I didn't want to get in touch with it because 30 years ago that was still quite new then, and I thought they'd probably show what nice guys they were to do an interview and then put a bullet in his head.
Yes.
So I didn't want to open up old wounds.
How did you finally make contact with Carlton?
Well, eventually I thought, well, enough years have gone by now. What I'll do, I'll send a letter to the address that was given on the recording, which I did, and sort of nothing happened for a while. Then all of a sudden I got a letter back from James Fulthorpe's sister-in-law, Jane Berry, in Loo in Cornwall. From then, everything just snowballed. I went on to the electoral roll, looking for Carlton Fulthorpe, and surprise, surprise, he was the only one in the country. So then I sent a letter to Carlton, who prefers to be called Carl, saying, Dear Mr. Fulthorpe, if your father was a submariner in World War II and was prisoner of war, and you lived in Woodlands Drive, Loo in Cornwall, would you please get in touch with me? I have some information concerning your late father.
Okay, well, let's cut quickly to Carlton then. What was your reaction when you got this note, Carlton?
Well, obviously, it was very, very surprising. I was a little dubious at first, of course. You get various things through the post these days.
You do indeed. You have to be on your guard.
Yes, but I very quickly returned by phoning Alan. I was probably a little guarded initially.
Yes.
Alan was obviously a very nice fella, and he put me very quickly at rest. We discussed things, and over a period of time, through contact, he's pieced a lot more of the story of my father together.
Well, had you ever heard the recording before he got in touch?
Oh, no, I didn't even know of its existence.
So what was your response when you heard it? You must have been quite moved, I'd have thought.
Yes, I was very moved to hear my father's voice. My father, at that point in time when that recording was made, would have been, I calculate, probably his late 20s. So,
Yes.
and bear in mind, I didn't see him until a few years after that when he was released. So I was listening to my father's voice, but the voice of a father I hadn't heard.
And had your mother, do you know, heard the message when it was originally broadcast?
As far as I know, and from my own recollection, I don't think my mother heard that recording.
And your father, did he talk to you much about the war?
Yeah, he was probably like a lot of people after the war. They didn't want to talk too much.
No,
but
my dad didn't.
No. I was curious, though, very curious. I've maintained a massive interest in the war in itself. I do recall asking my father about the war. He would tell me, but he always considered he was treated very well. Whether he was holding back, I don't know. He was very cute, my dad. He would not have trusted those Nazis in any way.
I'm sure he would have realised that it was part of a kind of low-level propaganda exercise.
Yeah, he might have also considered, well, they're saying this is going to go over the air to Lou in Cornwall. How do I know this? Are they pulling my leg? Is it really live radio?
So it must have been good for you, Alan, when you finally tracked down James Fulthorpe's son.
I just cannot tell you how elated I was. I really couldn't believe it. I was so emotional, and Carl, by his own admittance, is not a very emotional person, but when I found him, it was like finding a long-lost brother, because these ghosts that have haunted me for the last 30 years suddenly became flesh and bone, real people, and that was the most wonderful thing of the whole lot.
Alan Bailey and Carl Fulthorpe.